All right, good afternoon, everybody. Glad that some people still made it out for such a late session. I know it's been a long day. Hopefully you've had a great first day of Identiverse. I definitely have seen a lot of interesting talks, so hope you did the same. So thank you for joining us here for Triggering Identity Events for Cyber Defense. What we hope to cover in the next 20 minutes or so is hopefully a unique way of thinking about your identity platform or your IDP in a cyber defense scenario. Quick introductions. My name is Erik Kuhrman. I'm part of KPMG's cybersecurity practice. I'm based in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area. I work primarily with our high-tech clients, also financial services and telco, although I've done work in a variety of different industries over the years. I have about 15 plus years of cybersecurity architecture experience. And my passion is really around innovative, game-changing cybersecurity architecture, so really thinking about your cybersecurity tools in unique ways. I'm joined by my colleague, Khar, also known as TK. TK, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Khar Chin. I'm also out of the San Diego area for KPMG cybersecurity practice. I have about 12 years of experience in both deploying, implementing, and developing a lot of enterprise and consumer IAM systems for multiple clients. And within KPMG, I lead a lot of innovative investment for KPMGs around IAM integrations, mainly looking at what can we do with all the IAM products that we have in the market, so that we can provide a better security experience and user experience for organizations. So, Erik.
Thank you, TK. So jumping right in, the concept of using identity and access management for cyber defense was really born out of a common problem we kept coming across at multiple clients where they wanted to be able to freeze or quarantine an asset and do so in as least an invasive manner as possible. This was in a variety of cybersecurity scenarios, but we're going to cover one specific one today, and we'll get into more detail in a moment. But they also wanted to do that in as automated a fashion as possible, so to really minimize the amount of human touch. And so it really brought up two primary questions. One was, can we use IAM to achieve this? And then secondly, sorry about that. I lost my slide. I'm not going to press any more buttons here. Sorry, just in the interest of time, I'll keep talking. I apologize for the slide. Hopefully we'll get it back here in a moment. So the second big question was, given all the various approaches to quarantining or freezing an asset, would IAM be a quick way, a good way of doing it? So that's kind of the background to this. We actually architected this out with our client. We have one specific client who's kind of the background, which we're not going to disclose who that is. But so this was a real world scenario, and we actually architected this out with them and implemented it. So we know it works, and hopefully, again, we'll share with you some of the uniqueness around this approach. And again, I apologize for the slides. Are we going to get them back? Or? Okay. So we'll have the slides back. So I'm going to hand over to TK, who's going to talk us through the scenario in a bit more detail.
All right. So while we wait for the slides, so let's think about drill down the scenarios a little bit. So what we want to talk about is let's take an example. High severity vulnerabilities that we just figured out. Let's say an example of financial applications. So in this scenario, let's just say that an attacker can basically elevate their session privilege to take over the systems. So the impacts on this type of system is basically excessive SOA attack. We are talking about the financial applications here. So the impact can be the business operation side, monetary, data loss. It can impact the reputation of the organizations. You are talking about millions of dollars, depending on what kind of severity it is. And typically, the right thing to do is we just want to say, let's patch it up. There will be a security patch that we can apply to the systems. But more often than not, sometimes things are not like moving as fast as you would think from organizations. So a security patch, we will need to wait for our DevOps teams, support teams to apply the patch. It can take hours, days, sometimes depending on like the teams here, months, weeks, or sometimes it may fall off. So what we are thinking is like, what can we do with the short-term remediation while we wait for the security patch? In a lot of the organization here, so we have organizations have a lot of IAM products that they already have it in place. Can we leverage the IAM system to provide like a defensive measure, a short-term fix to the systems? So let's take a look at what can we do with the steps here. The first step, obviously, we start with the security vulnerability scans. We get the information out. It can provide a lot of information from these vulnerability scans here. For this information, the first thing we want to do is start categorizing what kind of vulnerability it is. Vulnerabilities can come in multiple ways. It can attack your OS layers, database, network, your application servers, your software itself. Depending, we can categorize this information and we can hand it to a person, and we can allow the IAM system to take the defensive measures. I can talk through multiple systems here, like here are the bullet points. Like, let's take an example, like let's say you have an IAG system. They typically manage your system like access requests, certifications. They are the system that can provide you with entitlements and user access and what's not. It controls a lot of the softwares and applications in your organization. It can also control your OS layers, who have what access. Let's say if the vulnerabilities is where like users can elevate their access. We can tap into these IAM systems and say, like, can we take out what the access that that are weak against? So earlier we have an examples of financial applications. Let's just say that like end users can access it and they can elevate the sessions. Maybe a subset of the end users that we want to prevent, let's say a purchase order users, they can become an administrator somehow. We can tap into our IAG system and we can think about like, can we take out all these roles that the user has in this application? Let's block them. Other things that we can all effectively do, they can be multiple roles and entitlements that the IAG system is managing. Take out a subset of users so that we are not actually like bringing down the entire system. Business can stay operate, maybe not at the optimal, stay 90%, but only a subset of users are like blocks. There are also other systems, single sign-on solutions that you have, WAMs that you have. They can act as like application gateways that like protecting your web applications there. One thing we can think about is like easiest way, blocks everything. Or we can inject policies into these like IAM systems here. For example, there are systems that have adaptive authentication. Can we inject a policy that says like I want to limit a subnet of IP addresses. I want to limit a group of users, or during the remediation, I only want to provide access to, let's say if it is a financial application, we can only just like limit it so that only financial department have access in the meantime, while limiting the access, blocking the access. We can actually get into that using our IAM products that we have in the market, you have in your organizations. Another example, privileged access management. Privileged access management basically is the password vault security vault with a bunch of workflows that there. If your privileged accounts are like the vulnerable issues, you can think about like limiting your password vault. What users, we can limit it in a sense that like let's block down the password vault so that only maybe 1 or 2 users can have access in the meantime. Or you can escalate the like a request to those password vault. In a sense, like let's say in the meantime, maybe you want to raise like another levels of like approvals in your PAM system. Your application owner, your security officer can start like needs to approve it if you need access in the meantime. You can inject these like all these actions. The way we can do it, the good thing about that is like a lot of the IAM products that we have on the market, they all comes with workflows, they all comes with rule engines. They comes with APIs that like you can easily orchestrate and run through it. And we can do it in two ways. One is automated way in the system. The other is also you can always put a human factors, because at the end of the day, you don't know what kind of vulnerabilities you are up against. And depending on your organizations, you probably don't know, like maybe organization A may have a bigger risk on these vulnerabilities than organization B. A human can actually make a decision if we run through this workflow to say that like, hey, this risk is a bigger data risk than the operation risk. And you can restrict the access more. And then in the organization B, they can say that, well, the data in our application is not that important. I would rather have a business as usual implementation. They can make the decision. We can implement all these like workflows and actions, present it to the like application owners, the impacted application owner or the security officer. Let them decide like here are a set of actions that you have. Here are the information and here are the impacted system. What kind of restrictions you want to do. So with all of these, basically IAM system can actually serve as like a short-term deterrent to your organizations that like your application won't, your organization is basically like waiting for the team to come up with the patch, the time, like maybe they won't need to wait until evening to bring the system down, apply the patch, or they need to wait for the weekend, however that may be. Wherever, and we also restrict it to what we need to restrict. And one other thing that like I want to add on this is the rollback mechanisms. So we can implement a lot of these, and we can always also roll it back, in a sense that a lot of the IAM products that we have on the market, they all come with audit, really good audit logs. They all come with all the trace that we need to do. If we can dig into those, we can basically roll back and reverse all the actions that we have done for this short-term remediations here. So, for example, if I remove access for Erik, or after the patch is done, we can lift the restriction. I will grant Erik back the access that he needs. If we limit it to a certain IP address through the policy, I can take out the policies. So we can orchestrate everything through with the workflows, with the data that we already have. And the IAM system already have enough powers that like they are limiting the identities. So we can actually start using that. So this is also just like another overview of like how the flows is going to happen. The starting point is always going to be the vulnerability scans that we get. And the scans can actually start triggers and a set of alerts for the team here. And it can create a security incident. You can pick like whatever you have in your organization, your ticketing system like ServiceNow or Remedies and what's not, your IAM system that manage the security, or any other system that manage your security incidents. And the incidents can initiate a workflow, integrate with like things there, let them know like, hey, there's vulnerabilities, what do you want to do? Once they know what to do, they take the decisions, or we can also automate the decision depending on the risk, and then push it to the next step, like here are the actions that we need to do. Let the IAM system handle it. And then IAM system can revoke all your access, start the cycles again, like when every patch is applied, roll back everything that you just done. So think about like what the IAM system, they already have the power to do that. We can add in a little bit extras and then apply the process on top of it. So over here, I'm going to hand it back to Erik for the high-level conceptual architecture.
Thank you, TK. So this is kind of a 90,000-foot view of the architecture, and as TK had mentioned, there's a lot of versatility, a lot of options when you're designing this architecture. So we like to think of it as being fairly flexible. So depending on your specific scenario, you may or may not choose to have any one of these constructs that are up on the slide. But just to quickly walk you through it, if in our scenario we're talking about a business application, so we're most interested in the users or user groups that are going to be accessing the application. And then, a undesired event like a high severity vuln being detected either with the application itself or on the server or servers the application is running on. If you have a rule set up in your monitoring software and you trap that high severity vuln as part of that rule and trigger an alert, the way we designed it at our client was to actually initiate a API call into the ITSM platform to generate a ticket and effectively start the SIR process. By generating the ticket, we by default instantiated a workflow in the ITSM platform that also had a rule about whether or not to invoke a call out to the IAM platform to initiate disabling of access to the users that were associated with that application. So it's a pretty straightforward closed loop architecture. Again, depending on the specific scenario, you could opt in or out any one of these constructs and even potentially further streamline the architecture. One other important point here is while our specific scenario revolved around an IAM, an on-premise IAM platform, this would work equally well with like an IDP as well. If we break down the scenario steps, so there has to be some event, some incident that occurs that kind of sets the whole chain into motion. In our case, is detection of a high severity vulnerability. You have to be able to trap that incident or event somehow. SIEMs are great tools for doing that. If you have something like a Splunk or an Alien Vault, those are great tools to look at for kind of triggering that whole chain in the process. In our case, the client wanted a ticket generated for two main reasons. One was to have kind of the paper trail, the record, if you will, of the event and what was done about it, but also to feed their dashboard and reporting into their SOC, so they had transparency of the whole event. The goal was then to disable or limit access, as TK was talking about. It doesn't have to be a carte blanche, disabling of all access to every user on that application, but maybe you want to limit access to a specific subset of your user population. Some key considerations in designing this type of architecture, you have to have some means of trapping the trigger. In this case, a vulnerability scan, but as we're going to talk about in just a moment, this could really be used in a variety of security incidents. So you need to think about, okay, how am I going to identify that event and kind of start the whole chain of action here. It does not have to flow through your ITSM tool or your SIR tool. Again, our client had that specific requirement. I personally like that requirement because it's nice to kind of have that paper trail or that record. Also know, who the remediation got assigned to and what's being done about it. So back to TK's point about the time window for this. If you're trying to keep the disabling access to as short a period as possible, then by having the ticket there, it allows you to kind of track and kind of keep the team's urgency up and as they remediate the issue and mitigate the threat. And then clearly there's a lot of other, more invasive or harder hitting kill switches that you could build into this architecture. Again, our client was looking for something pretty lightweight, something fast, and as TK had talked about, something that was easily reverted once the threat had been mitigated. So all of the design really met the litmus test for all of those conditions. As stated, this really could apply to a variety of other scenarios. So it could apply to a variety of security incidents. For example, if you knew that there was an active recon happening on the server farm that this application resided in, that might be enough to just trigger the disabling of access until investigation can be done and that threat could be mitigated. This could also be done as part of a regular maintenance procedure. If you just want to shut off access for a period of time in an automated fashion through your IDM or IDP. And then even in the event of decommissioning or retiring the application or the servers, this could be the first step in shutting off user access so the support teams can go through their actions of doing that. If we look at some of the benefits, so one that we really liked about this architecture is it gives your SOC or your SIEM team a powerful defense tool. Now you're using your identity and access management capability for cyber defense to protect your business. So we really liked that idea and definitely saw benefit in doing that. Automation minimizes the amount of human intervention here. So that just makes this less error prone, less cumbersome, and actually performs pretty quickly once implemented. It's very versatile, as we talked about. I mean, TK went through, just on the IDM side of things, all the different approaches you could leverage. So it's pretty flexible in that sense. And then we found that it was a pretty quick and again, fairly lightweight method of addressing that quarantine or freeze requirement. If we look at some of the key takeaways, and I'll let TK cover the first two here.
All right. So before we even jump into the key takeaway, one of the other benefits that we can think about is the actions are not it's not always black and white when these security vulnerabilities happen. It's not always there's always the high risk. It's not always that business operation is always needs to run at the same time. So the solution that we talk about, one of the main benefits is you can meet in the middle, where you are not basically shutting down the servers, or you are not taking access away from everybody's. We can implement in actions only limiting a subset. So that is also one of the biggest benefits there, because not everything is, like I said, black and white. There is a vulnerabilities, but business should continue to run. There is always a business should also stay to run, but what is the risk that what are the data that you are losing if you continue to run it? Put the money to it, what is the impact? So that is also one of the key benefits in these architectures. And the key takeaway basically that we talk about is in a lot of our cyber defense strategies, we can reuse a lot of the tools that the organization have. Almost every organization will have some sort of an IAM system that's already in place. And the IAM system typically provide access, grant access, take advantage of those IAM systems, and then become more proactive than reactive to the breach. And then also with this IAM system as the new enterprise parameter, it will actually provide an effective means to the automated protection of the access. So if we start a manual process, start the tickets, and then start blocking access, hey, I need to take down several roles or several entitlements on these application servers. A manual ways, if we don't have this, it can take days, and it's pretty much as good as waiting for the security patch to get applied. There is not walks are we are just creating walks over move walks. So if we already have the actions, if IAM system can already do it, why don't automate this? User may just make the decision, the removal and blocking of the access. Let the IAM system handle pretty much everything. Right?
Excellent. Well, as to, as mentioned before, we think this gives your SOC or your SIEM team a very powerful tool to leverage. So hopefully you've seen how this is thinking of IDM or your IDP a little bit differently. And then it's an alternative to, somewhat what we would think are more invasive approaches to, like firewall rule changes or, even configuration to the application or the servers itself. So again, this was born out of the client asking, how can I freeze or quarantine my asset for a finite period of time? How can I choose which users I lock out and for how long? What's the best way to do that? How can I minimize any human intervention or eliminate it altogether? So those are all the key considerations that led into this architecture design. And we felt that this met the litmus test for all those conditions. Looking out more broadly, from a roadmap perspective, where the client was going next was to apply this to a larger portion of their critical application portfolio. So in this case, they went after a financial analytics system hanging off of their ERP, but now they're looking at leveraging this same architecture for other critical applications to achieve the same result. And with that, so that's effectively the end of our presentation. Again, thank you for joining us on a late session Tuesday afternoon. We do have a few minutes left, so I'll open it to any questions that the audience may have. Sir?
A little bit of a sidecar topic, I guess, but do you have any thoughts on the security event token ROC, like for the representation of the events?
I don't know. Well, I'm not familiar with that, so.
It's just an ROC that basically says to use like JAT tokens, JSON web tokens, as a sign for representing the security events in your system.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have, a strong opinion or direction on that. I've heard of it. Definitely, I would say in context of this architecture, if that were something that was ingrained in how the SIEM is implemented and that was something the organization was actively using or looking to use, then obviously we'd have to consider it, in context of this architecture. But in our case, we didn't get quite to that level of granularity. And I guess there wasn't the need to have, tokenization is going to give you that, concreteness around the actual event, right? So now you have it like basically ID'd. It's got its own fingerprint in a manner of speaking. That wasn't really the requirement here. I can imagine, there's certainly defense scenarios where that would be a requirement, where you'd have to factor that into the architectural design for sure. Yes, sir.
Talk about cyber defense strategy. You have an example of a cyber offensive strategy at all?
Yes, the short answer is I do. I mean, in 22 seconds, probably can't go into too much depth, but yeah, that's actually an interesting paradigm shift, right? So a lot of companies are going on the offense. In some cases, it's internally directed offense, right? So they're trying to attack their own systems. There's great startups out there like Synac, that does that type of service, and in essence, they only get paid if they actually penetrate and achieve results. But yeah, offense is definitely the new defense, or at least that shift is taking place.
Right.
Anything else?
No.
All right, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know it's late in the day, so appreciate it.